you all back here after hearing about the economic impact of Israel's space industry. We'll now talk about the role of space agencies globally. I'm delighted to invite to the stage Dr. Dganit Paikovsky to moderate our first panel. Dr. Paikovsky from the Hebrew University is an expert on international relations with a unique, focused, and first-hand experience in the interface between space and world politics. Dganit, please join me on the stage and introduce the panelists.
Good morning. I've been doing this for several years, but believe me, I'm still excited. I'm honored to open this special session on space agencies and beyond, multiple clients in the space market. This morning's panel includes distinguished speakers representing diverse international perspectives overlooking global space activities as providers and in accordance with this panel's theme as customers. In previous Ilan Ramon conferences, we focused on the different roles and responsibilities that agencies have in advancing space activities. Today, we would like to focus more narrowly on the role of space agencies as first clients or customers in an effort to make sure they are not the only ones eventually. So in this context, we are here today to discuss the interrelationship between agencies and the private sector to provide entry to market and provide some validation for future investors and customers. Please welcome to the stage Professor Teodoro Valente, President of the Italian Space Agency. I invite you to sit in front of your photo behind you. Mr. Jean-Marc Astrog, the Chief Strategy Officer at CNES. Dr. Christian Feichtinger, Executive Director of the International Astronautical Federation, the IAF. And Professor Dan Bloomberg, the chairperson of the Israel Space Agency. While they're sitting, I would say that if I read their bios, we will never finish in time and we won't have any time for questions. Therefore, I invite you to check their bios on the website of the conference. And before I point out the first question, I would like to tell you that I deeply appreciate that you've come here today from afar and that you chose to come here in person to express support and acknowledgement of the Israel space ecosystem during the challenging and difficult times that Israel is currently facing. In this respect, your deeds, thank you. In this respect, your deeds are more important than your words. Thank you. Let me begin. I would like to start by asking Dr. Feichtinger and Professor Bloomberg, how do you think being an early customer of space companies help push the boundaries of technology and accelerate innovation in the space sector?
So generally, I want to start off by saying that space is a very challenging environment. And when you're an early customer, I hope now everyone can hear me.
Thank you.
So I'll say that again. Space is an extremely challenging environment. Early customers and early inventors they have to make breakthroughs. And I think that space and the immense challenges that it creates actually makes everything that we do in space a huge breakthrough, not only to space, but to other issues. So we're actually creating new technologies, new science, understanding the universe by being early customers and by being early inventors. And I think we're going to touch upon that in a moment again when we talk about academia and other things, but I'll leave that part for the next question.
Christian, please.
Yeah, thank you, Deganit, and let me just express on behalf of the International Astronautical Federation that we are really pleased to be here. There is a very long-standing history of close cooperation between our federation and Israel, the Israel Space Agency. We've organized together with you 2 very successful congresses, International Astronautical Congresses, the last one in 2015 in Jerusalem. And this is really what the International Astronautical Federation can contribute to the development of space globally, that is providing a neutral platform where all the different stakeholders, and if we talk about stakeholders, it's of course first and foremost the space agencies, but also space industry, academia, space universities, can come together and share knowledge exchange and set up new partnerships. The National Astronautical Federation was created some 74 years ago, so we have a very long-standing history created in times of the Cold War, actually. And originally, the principle in our federation was one country, one member. So we had some 9 or 10 members that were the founding members, and these were typically space societies of the different countries. But now, but then gradually over the years, the federation felt that we need to open up, and of course, then more and more members came in, and we opened up to other categories, and most importantly, space agencies. Today, you have about, well, more than 40 space agencies and space offices worldwide, and we are very proud to be able to say that practically all of them are a member in our federation. And these are the big ones, the NASA, the ESA, but also the smaller ones, smaller countries. And today, the federation has 513 members from 77 countries, so we are really a truly global organization. And of course, one category that is the biggest today and has also the biggest potential of further growth is companies, is industry. Today, the number of startups and small companies that are coming up is almost unlimited. So every year when we welcome some 50 new members, the biggest portion is industry. And coming back to your question, what the federation, what we can contribute to this kind of agencies supporting startups and industry as first customer is to provide this platform where agencies can meet and hear from these startups, to give startups also a platform to present what they have to offer, and space agencies to kind of hear from where they can really invest also and where they need to support.
Thank you. Professor Valente and Mr. Astrog, we've heard about the potential, but it's risky, it's challenging. So what are the major challenges that you see from your agency perspective in taking the role of early customers or first customers?
First of all, good morning to everybody. Thank you for this invitation, which I have accepted with a real pleasure in order to represent I would say the Italian space or space in Italy. And in this, I would say, terrible and unbelievable period, we heard a few minutes ago by my friend Uri Ron that we must look forward, we must look to the future, and space is one of the pillars for this. We will do it with the cooperation and the discussion between all peaceful people. So having said that, coming to your question, I think in my opinion that being the first customer, it presents some major challenges with respect to the usual way of doing. And this includes, for example, significant risk with unproven products, the need of reliable due diligence on the company and technology, potential cost overruns due to development issues, the necessity of market development efforts, also very important, and the requirement of a long-term commitment that could be difficult if the technology underperforms with respect to the, let's say, what expected. And especially for the unproven technology, a very important topic is the risk management of that, because we need a rigorous process of phase testing, validation, most of time incremental implementation of these new technologies, and very clear milestones together also with very clear contractual agreements on performance and cost containment. And we sometimes also need to rely on, let's say, fallback options, and also to expert reviews in order to mitigate the risk. So it's quite different jobs also for an agency with respect to the usual way of working with in other contexts.
Thank you. Mr. Ostrog.
Good morning, everybody. First, let me say that I'm deeply honored to be there today. Philippe Baptiste, our chairman, was not able to come, but we believe it was very important that CNES and France was present today in these dramatic circumstances. Secondly, I'd like to say that we have a very fruitful cooperation with Israeli Space Agency, and we look forward to continue it on the scientific project. I'd like to put things maybe in perspectives, because, you know, I entered CNES, I started my career in 1985, a long time ago. At that time, we had only a few projects in France, in Space Agency, one launcher, Ariane, a few satellites, Earth observation satellite, telecommunication satellites. We have a few industry. The funding was 100% public, and the organization was pyramidal. Government, agency, industry. And government was speaking to agency was giving orders to industry. No need to say that today the situation is completely different. And it is a good thing. Space has become a commercial business. It's still strategic, and I would say that it is more and more strategic, but on top of that, it is commercial. So we have private funding, we have a lot of startups. It has been said before, everybody is talking with everybody. Sometimes it's easier for a 6 months born startup to speak to the French President de la République than to the President of CNES, but it is like that. So it's completely different. And we had to adapt. First, we were requested by our government to adapt and to support this newborn ecosystem. How we do that? We do that by changing our procurement policy. To make things simple, specify less, being in a support to project of others, which is very difficult for a 60-year-old agency, which has been quite successful in some project, to say, okay, this is your project, maybe it's not a good idea, but we support it, we help you, no matter what we believe about that. So it's a big change. And also, we apply a new procurement policy by buying services instead of product. Instead of developing satellites, we procure the data of the satellite, and we do it before they even exist. And I would say the same as Professor Valente. It's a big risk for agencies. You know, public procurement, we'd like to buy things that are demonstrated, well demonstrated, and here we are asked to take a risk. So we do it. We have specific, let's say, process to do that. We continue to develop scientific projects. We take less risk for scientific cooperation and project, but on top of that, to support this newborn ecosystem, we have specific tools.
Thank you. Professor Valente, in continuation to what you just said, can you share specific success stories or lessons learned from previous collaborations between the ASI and private companies, or maybe you can highlight elements that contributed to the success or provided valuable insights for the future?
Yeah, I mean, most of times, at least up to my knowledge, space agency often they do have infrastructure and expertise which are not, which are invaluable in terms of estimation to private companies, and which can be very synergic with the expertise which are inside the private companies. In this sense, I just want to give to you a couple of examples for what it concerns the Italian Space Agency. We have some, I will underline just two, successful histories of cooperation and stories with our industries. The first one is a company which is called EGIOS. That's a joint venture between Telespazio, which is a Leonardo and Thales company, and the Italian Space Agency. And it's a real example of successful public-private partnership cooperation in the Earth observation sector. EGIOS is operating on the Cosmos SkyMed data, which is the first example in Italy of an institutional collaboration between the agency and the defense. And so it is something which has a dual nature, but it is working on the civil sector. Okay. And the program might be beneficial for many applications, monitoring, for example, environmental disaster, and together also with data exchange with other agencies. I just want to remember, for example, the exchange of data by Cosmo and ALOS 2 with the JAXA for, unfortunately, disasters in our country and also in Japan, but also for monitoring agriculture, defense and security, obviously, in this case, application. Another example, in this case, is a company which is called Altec, which is in Turin, north of Italy. It means Aerospace Logistic Technology Engineering Company. And again, that's a public-private company, which is owned by ASI and Thales Alenia Space. And it provides engineering and logistic services and supports also the operation, actually, on the International Space Station, where Italy built one of the 3 existing modules on the ISS. And Altec, for example, was a company to which we funded just before Christmas holidays a new project in order to build a lunar robotic control mission system in Turin, which is going to be added to the Martian facilities. And so both these examples, up to me, they underscore the significance of collaboration between public and private institutions, and that is the Italian space agencies and private companies to push on advancement in space technology. And this collaboration is very important because it helps all of us not only in reducing the cost management, but also to define together from different point of views, institutional and business basis, future programs, in this case, for example, exploration or Earth observation, to be beneficial for everybody.
Thank you. And when I listen to both of you, Mr. Estrog and Professor Valente, you talk about the challenge in adapting, of making these fluctuations towards each other. So I want to come back to you, Mr. Estrog, and ask you about how does CNES adapt, in particular in terms of contractual relationships with the industry? What are the lessons that you've learned from the last few years?
That it is difficult to adapt, especially when you are a whole organization. that has been, again, I said, quite successful for some projects. But we implemented a specific organization. We selected people who are willing to support startup instead of imposing, to engineers to do so. It's not a matter of age. It's a matter of openness, of culture, and so on. So we put them in a specific organization 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's called Connect by CNES. Okay. Their role is to support newcomers in the space business. And there are, as we said, many newcomers in automotive industry, aeronautics, energy, and so on and so on. And we provide them with a specific budget, a small one. It's not necessary to spend, tens of million euros to help, especially for seed, for starting the business. Then, when the startup grow, it's out of reach for space agencies. And they provide a series of tools to support this startup, technical expertise. That's necessary because we are working in a difficult and challenging technological field. Access to funding. Space is complex. Space organization is complex. You have many, many gates in France, in Europe, between ESA, between European Union, to have access to contracts and so on. So these newcomers do not know that. So it's important to help them to know which gate to use and so on. We provide also access to accelerators, startup accelerators. We created a specific accelerators called Space Funders together with Italy and with Germany, and Italy has joined that. We are working with the BLAST accelerator in France, which is also located in Israel, by the way. An accelerator is very important for the startup to grow. We provide education, space education. We have a specific and free educational program for space. It's on the web. It's for people knowing nothing on space activities, space applications. We had 3,000 people following that program, including ministers in France who are interested in learning about space capabilities and so on. So it's a big success. So we really had a professional team of people in charge of doing that in CNES. What is difficult is to transform this small team spirit to the large CNES organization, but we are working on that.
Thank you. Professor Bloomberg, this session is focused on agencies and what they do with the private sector, but we know that eventually this ecosystem cannot survive without academia. So what is the role of academia, of the academic research in this interrelationship, especially regarding services that we want to advance further into future daily life?
So thank you for that question. When you talk about academic or academia's inventions, technologies that come out of academia, anyone here sitting in this audience that comes from industry is going to say that anything done in academia is at most TRL2, mostly TRL1. I can see the smiles already on the faces over here. We all know the laugh that you get when you say that you have a great invention coming out of a university, and they'll all say, it's far from being anything we can use for a space mission. Now that's the downside, but really the upside of that is that everything we do in academia is breakthroughs. Now of those breakthroughs, yes, it's true, 80 to 90% will never mature to a technology that can be launched. But for the 10 or 20% that can mature, that's where we're making the big breakthroughs. Now that's extremely important. Anything that has to do with new technologies, and I can give a few examples, but any science missions are based on academic research. They need open-mindedness. They need processes that are not always defined, that you know the methodology, but you're not focused on a specific result, that you can accept different results than you have. So any new ideas that come around physics come from academia, analysis of things related to space. In our lab, we worked on hyperspectral images using compressive sensing. None of those have been launched into space yet. We get the same smile when we mention it, but the challenge is actually taking it from TRL-2 to TRL-7, 8, and eventually 9. That's a big challenge. But those ideas do come out of academia. Some of the useful things that we use in everyday life have gone through the process of starting in academia, going into space, coming back to serve us in our daily lives. Internet, much of it started in academia. Now, that's not a space technology, but it serves us in space, and a lot of what we do in space could not be done without that. But memory foam, some of us sleep on tempura mattresses at night. That was developed for the space shuttle. Velcro was developed for astronauts. You know, we use that on a lot of things nowadays, Velcro. Some of the diapers were developed for the astronauts. And everything that goes into that diaper that absorbs liquids was developed there. It's used now also in agriculture, the same materials. In Israel, we have a lot of things that are coming out of academia that go into our space industry also. So I mentioned hyperspectral. I saw over here earlier representatives from Astera that use synthetic aperture radar. It started off in academia looking at water leaks from space. Ramondo here in the room also started off in an academic institution that came from academia and now is a startup company. So I think academia actually plays a huge role, much bigger than we ever thought. And it's something that you cannot ignore when you talk about a space industry, because you need those new ideas. You need those out-of-the-box ideas. You need them coming not only from us, the professors, you need them coming from students that haven't been molded into boxes yet, that can think out of the box, really out of the box, that have not been in the industry yet. So academia plays a huge role. Academia also plays a role in the analysis of the results, and there, I think, there's no other way, because the amount of data that we collect in space is huge, and it's the master's students, the PhD students, that at the end of the day look at all of that data.
Thank you. And back to you, Christian. You hear the discussion about the interrelations, and you have a different perspective, maybe from space, overlooking the whole ecosystem. And you nicely described the growth and the evolution of the Federation over the past several decades. So from your perspectives, in what way space agencies continue to contribute to further development of the Federation, of the Federation as a multi-stakeholder space environment?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Deganit. And I want to mention that you have been one of our IEF vice presidents for many years in the past. So you know very well, of course, how we are structured. You have also created very important initiatives.
They don't
therefore,
know.
I'm mentioning.
They need to know.
Yes. The IEF International Space Economics Platform. But coming back to your question, yes, I mean, we have a bit the privilege to be out of the different sectors and look at it. And what we've seen over the last years, I think, is a really stunning transformation. Where in the past, as Jean-Marc has mentioned, everything was kind of very straightforward, government giving the guideline, the agencies are picking the industry, providing contracts. Today it is much more complex. And of course, why is this system establishing itself? Because it is, in some aspect, more efficient. And what means more efficient? More efficient means that it can be the implementation of a project with, under the leadership of industry, and as agency, as a customer, can be cheaper, can be quicker to be implemented. That's what the main advantages are. But as was mentioned before, of course, somebody will need to pay a price for that. And that is certainly the agency that is taking part of the risk, or a big part of the risk. At the end, we are talking about taxpayers' money, which the agencies, of course, need to justify how they are spending and why they are spending it in a way that may be cheaper and quicker, but maybe more risky in terms of success. I think this is a very important aspect, of course, to have in mind, because the general public today needs to kind of understand how space today works. I think in the past, the enthusiasm about space was there over years. Then in the recent years, I think there was a bit of a kind of downsize of it. Nobody was really getting excited anymore about space. But today, I think, again, we are living in a very, very exciting time. And here the federation, like our federation, have a very important role in order to popularize space again, in order to kind of advertise for space and explain also and show and demonstrate to the public what space can really bring to daily life of people. And then, of course, they are asking the money, the question is the money, our taxpayers' money, used in the right way. And I think what the recent months and years have shown is that this new system that is just about to develop, and it will still develop further, has its big advantages. And I really, I think we need to appreciate also what agencies are doing in terms of taking the risk and giving startups and small companies a chance to show that they can do maybe quicker, that they can do maybe cheaper, but of course not always 100% success guaranteed.
Thank you. We are getting to the last round of questions in this session, and I want to offer Professor Bloomberg the opportunity to speak and ask you, how do you evaluate this cost effectiveness of partnering with space companies compared to traditional government-led developments?
So I want to start off by saying something. We spoke here about startups, we spoke about agencies, we spoke about a federation, and we spoke about academia. And we spoke about challenges of taking, new ideas, materializing them at the end to some space mission. And I think, and this comes out of a discussion that I had with Dr. Cohen earlier, the big challenge is going from science fiction to science mission. If I had to put a title at the end of this session, I think that would be the sound bit for this session, science fiction to science mission. And that's a challenge for all of us. Now, cost effectiveness is something that's very difficult to measure economically. If you ask, what the monetary value of a science mission is, no one will want to give you an answer on that, even though you do know that any of our missions eventually did pay off. So I'll give you one example. It's related to NASA. When I was a student, the amount of data that the NASA administrator permitted to downlink back to Earth from a Mars mission was limited. The end result was data compression. Data compression serves us in everyday lives now. But when that was launched, the idea was, how do we reduce the cost of the amount of students analyzing the data to try and look at cost effectiveness. It's the wrong term to use when you talk about breakthroughs. We actually need to spend that money and hope that we know what we're doing at the end, so that in the long term, it serves humanity.
That's a nice way of looking at the cost effectiveness, and I'm with you. Mr. Strog, we've talked about the challenges, and Christian was talking about the immense risk that agencies need to bear. What are the new tools that you're implementing at CNES to develop the ecosystem and to manage these kind of risks?
I'd like to take one example, which is based on a fund which has been implemented by President Macron a few years ago, which is called France 2030, which is not only related to space, but also to nuclear energy, to artificial intelligence, to deep sea research. But there is 1.5 billion euro dedicated to space. By the way, it has been reduced to 1.3 billion euro. We lost 200 million, by the way. And the way to spend that money was completely different to what we did before with big programs. It was oriented to newcomers for new markets. And the idea was to promote the utilization of space data among public and private users. And we have been asked in CNES to release a big call in all French administrations, and there are a lot of French administrations, national, local, and so on, to say to them, you will get free space data during 3 years. You just have to express your need. And then CNES will collect all the needs. We will organize call for tenders. We will select companies, startup, but not only startup. They will deliver data to you. For instance, the customs express a need to, observe the ships and so on. So we selected one startup called On-Seed Labs, which have developed a very smart way to detect ships, even when they cut their anti-collision system from space. With satellite and so on. And so we procure this data to that startup. They provide a lot of data that are now distributed to customs, to maritime authorities, to harbor, and so on. So it's a very original way to stimulate the utilization of space data. And the idea is that after 3 years, of course, these administrations, they will have to pay or to say, okay, I do not need this data. So just to mention a very specific way to stimulate the ecosystem for startup and for new markets.
Excellent, thank you. Professor Valente, if I combine what we've just been talking about, and you look into the future, you just started your position, congratulations. Professor Bloomberg said, we need to go from science fiction to space mission. So how do you envision the next decade and the strategies that agencies need to adopt now to make this vision really happen?
Thank you for your question. I mean, if we look to the international debate or discussion or action already put into the table, into place, for example, in the USA, but not only in the USA, let's think just an example in India, for example. In my opinion, actually, what is happening is that space agencies are evolving in their role to become a catalyst for private sector growth. And by acting, as we said before, as fourth client, and by using a sort of space term, space agencies can be a sort of launchpad for private companies to enter the space market with confidence, but also to validate their capabilities for future investors. It seems to me, in order to be synthetic, that a space agency must have a sort of double role. From one side, facilitator, from the other one, enable. And this is the philosophy of our Italian Space Agency, because we are, and so this is the way in which we see the future. We are involved as first client, but not just about or only procurement. We want to support, and we are supporting, innovation, actions in order to reduce barriers, and to contribute ultimately to the vitality of the space area. Let me just give a couple examples to you. In our board of directors, we do have colleagues which bring to us the point of view of the Ministry of University and Research. We do have colleagues which bring to us the point of view of the Ministry of Enterprises, so startup, private, etc., and of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we do have to couple space diplomacy, which is very important, as putting the agency as an enabler for international collaboration. Then let me come back to the point of Professor Bloomberg. I am coming from academia, so research and development is the future. We will not have any more future technology without any research and development activities. And in this area, for example, we do have, as Italian Space Agency, a very huge number of agreements with Italian university and with public research centers in Italy. We just signed before Christmas a framework agreement with the, we call it CRUI. This is the association of all directors of the Italian university, in order to put efforts together with in a synergic way. And then last but not least, and this is also involves our Ministry of University and Research, we do have all the actions which are strictly necessary and required on education and outreach, because we need qualified human capitals. We need to push our teenagers, our, how to say, students, our sons, to develop passion, if it's fine for them, for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which is essential for future activities in the space. And coming back to the industrial side, I think that, so to the concept of the first client, we just mentioned again before, I think that being the first client for an agency in the future will allow to private companies to demonstrate their capability and technology in a real world context, not locally, but internationally. And this is not only facilitates the market approach, the market revenue, the market share, but it is essential also for the validation for potential investors. And now we are moving through more competitions, and so this is very important. We can just remember the debate at the last Sevilla conference. It's very important that the investors can rely on a reliable assessment. And in this context, and I finished, I think that also the international collaboration is crucial for the success of the global space ecosystem. And so this is the reason because of we, but not only we, I mean, everybody which share this vision will come partnership with private companies from around the world, knowing that a different expertise, new fresh resources strengthens the entire industry for the future competition.
Thank you. And with what you ended with, I'm going to move to the last question to Christian and talk about collaboration. You look at things from a very global perspective. Space is challenging, but also the commercial and the political environments are challenging. How does the IAF manage space relationships in challenging commercial and political environments?
Yeah, thank you, Deganit, for this question. I wanted to kind of continue from what Professor Valenti was just mentioning, space diplomacy, which kind of where space cooperation is a very important aspect, of course. I think this, especially in times of geopolitical instability worldwide, space can again show that it has the potential to contribute to diplomacy on a global scale. And that's what one of the major missions also of our federation is, because by bringing together these different actors, coming from 77 different countries worldwide, agencies that are typically known for being open for cooperation, industries that are typically also known for harsh competition, academia, which again is kind of the basis of everything which industry and also agency is basing their activities on, and bringing all this together on neutral grounds. And that is where it brings us back to the original foundation of our federation, where in the time of the Cold War, some wise people said, well, we should have a platform where the East and the West can meet and exchange, which was not possible in any bilateral format, but in a multilateral format, it is possible. And since then, we've been true really to our motto, connecting all space people for a sustainable future. We will continue to do that through our events, through providing this neutral platform in kind of a spirit of cooperation. And we are very happy that we are successful so far, and I think there is still a lot to do today and also in the coming years.
Thank you very much. And with that, we conclude. Let's pray together that we manage together to move from science fiction, peaceful fiction, to good reality and to space missions. Thank you very much.